Two men prosecutors say helped spark the investigation into the Saunders family were in court today. Brandon Henderson, Sr. and Josh Saunders are now facing charges in a child sex abuse case. The Ohio Attorney General's office says the investigation first began in December of last year. 10 TV's Kristen McFarland is live in Vinton County. Kristen, what do we know about the relationship between these men and the Saunders family?
Yeah, Bryn, well, first of all, Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson's bond was set at $250,000 by a judge just a little while ago. Both men pled not guilty. As you mentioned, this all started in December when an investigation was open into alleged sexual abuse of two children. Now, this led to the indictments and arrests of both Hocking County men, Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson. Saunders is charged with 3 counts of rape and 1 count gross sexual imposition. Henderson is facing 21 charges, including 8 counts sexual battery, 8 counts of gross sexual imposition, and 4 counts endangering children. Investigators say the investigation into these 2 men are what led to an investigation into Elizabeth and Gary Saunders Jr. and what ultimately led to discovery of the 16 children. Both parents are facing sexual battery charges and each 2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. The Attorney General's office says the victim is not a family member of the immediate Saunders family. Right now, we are working to learn the alleged connection and relationship with those 2 men and the Saunders family. We'll, of course, bring you the latest as we learn more. For now, reporting live in Vinton County, Kristen McFarland, 10 TV News.
Kristen, thank you. And like she just said, the investigation into sexual assault allegations against these 2 men led investigators to investigate Gary Saunders Jr. and Elizabeth Saunders for separate allegations of sexual misconduct involving a minor. The young couple is now facing an indictment related to those allegations. That's in addition to the allegations linked to this discovery of 16 children inside a home with 4 adults in Vinton County. Each adult in the home is facing more than a dozen charges related to child endangerment. On June 30th of this year, officers went to serve a warrant for the unlawful sexual conduct charge. And when they entered the home, investigators found 16 children they say they did not expect to be there. At the time, the Ohio Attorney General described the condition of the home the 20 peoples were living in was, quote, deplorable. There's no court date scheduled for the family right now.
The Saunders case took a shocking turn when 2 new arrests surfaced. And those arrests may have uncovered a much bigger investigation than anyone expected. But why did these suspects appear after the original case began? And what did investigators discover that changed everything? The answer lies in a chain of events that started with one investigation and expanded into something far larger than the first headlines revealed. Before we continue, subscribe to U.S. Crime Cases and stay with us as we separate the confirmed facts from the claims still being tested fairly. But we need to clear up one critical point before we go any further. The arrests of Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson Sr. did not cause officers to enter the Saunders home on June 30. That search had already happened. The 2 men were arrested later on August 21st. What their arrests did was expose the hidden route investigators had taken before the public ever heard about the 16 children found inside that home. The arrests did not start the famous part of the case. They finally showed us where the case had really started. 3 revelations explain how the case expanded, how the first investigation produced information for a second case, why a DNA warrant eventually led officers into the Saunders home, and what the reported family connections between the defendants may explain without proving guilt. Those details make the case look much wider, but they also leave serious questions that investigators and the courts have not answered publicly. According to the Ohio Attorney General's office, a Vinton County grand jury issued indictments connected to 3 related criminal investigations on August 21st, 2026. Josh Saunders was 23. Brandon Henderson Sr. was 40. Both men were from South Bloomingville. Authorities said they were arrested without incident by officers from the Vinton and Ross County Sheriff's Offices and BCI. Saunders was indicted on 4 charges, 3 first-degree felony counts of rape and 1 third-degree felony count of gross sexual imposition. Henderson was indicted on 21 charges involving child endangerment, gross sexual imposition, and sexual battery. Court reporting says the allegations connected to Saunders cover a period between January 2020 and June 2023, while the allegations involving Henderson cover a period between January 2020 and November 2025. Those details are difficult to hear, especially because the first investigation involved allegations concerning 2 children. But the children should not become background objects in a discussion about arrest dates and charge totals. They are the reason this investigation matters. Their names and private experiences should be protected. We can recognize the seriousness of what prosecutors allege without pretending that we know facts officials have not released or using the children's pain to make the story sound more dramatic. We also have to be fair about the legal position of the 2 men. An indictment means a grand jury found enough evidence for criminal charges to move forward. It is not a finding of guilt. On August 24th, Saunders and Henderson appeared in court and entered not guilty pleas. Court reporting said a judge set bond at $250,000 for each man and ordered them not to contact one another or the alleged victims. Their cases are pending, so prosecutors still have to prove every charge with admissible evidence, and the defense has the right to question that evidence. I understand why some viewers may look at 25 combined charges and feel that the outcome is already obvious. But a courtroom cannot work from a reaction to a number. The state must connect each charge to specific evidence and to the person accused. Defense lawyers can challenge the timeline, the witnesses, the records, or the way investigators interpreted the evidence. Taking that process seriously does not dismiss the alleged victims. It protects the truth by making sure the final decision is based on proof rather than public anger. The timing is what makes the arrests so important to the larger Siders case. To the public, Saunders and Henderson looked like 2 new men who had suddenly been added after the case became national news. But the official record places their investigation at the beginning. They appeared late in public, not late in the investigative timeline. That first investigation began in December 2025, roughly 6 months before officers searched the home on Omer Street. At the request of the Vinton County Sheriff's Office, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation's Special Victims Unit opened an investigation into allegations of sexual abuse involving 2 children. The Attorney General said that investigation eventually resulted in the indictments against Saunders and Henderson. Vinton County Prosecutor William Archer later added a human detail about how the wider matter began. According to Archer, Dollar General employees contacted authorities because they had concerns about children they observed. Officials have not publicly explained exactly what the employees saw, what they heard, which children were involved, or what information they gave police. We should not fill that silence with guesses. According to the prosecutor, the employees noticed something concerning and contacted authorities. That deserves attention, but it does not mean they solved the case or understood everything investigators later found. If you see a child who appears to be in immediate danger, reporting what you actually observed can allow trained professionals to check. A report is not proof, so concerns should go to the proper authorities instead of becoming public accusations. Their exact role remains unclear, but their call may have helped a serious investigation begin. For months, the investigation involving Saunders and Henderson developed outside public view. That is common in cases involving children and sensitive evidence. Investigators may interview witnesses, review records, seek testing, and present evidence to a grand jury before making arrests. This may explain why a case opened in December did not produce indictments until August. Still, officials have not released a complete month-by-month account, so we do not know which steps took the most time or when prosecutors believed the case was ready. Then came the handoff that changed the direction of the case. The Ohio Attorney General's office said information obtained during the December investigation prompted BCI to open a second investigation in March 2026. That is the confirmed link between the case involving Saunders and Henderson and the later investigation involving Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders. What was that information? Was it a statement, a record, a location, a family connection, or something else investigators encountered? Officials have not publicly said. This missing bridge matters because it connects two different groups of defendants and different allegations. We can ask what investigators learned, but we cannot present a theory as if police or prosecutors confirmed it. Public record reporting identifies Saunders as part of the extended Siders family. Reporting says he is the son of Virginia Siders Saunders, the nephew of Gary Siders Jr., and the grandson of Gary Siders Sr., and Christina Siders. Henderson has been identified in reports as Virginia's partner and as connected to the family through marriage. Those reported relationships may help explain why investigators mapped the cases together, but they do not prove that the men acted with Gary and Elizabeth or knew about anyone else's alleged conduct. That is where public debate can become unfair. One side may see the family links and assume one coordinated plan. The other side may argue that the cases are only connected because information from one investigation led to another. At this stage, the public record confirms the investigative handoff and the reported relationships. It does not confirm a shared criminal agreement among all the defendants. Each person must be judged by the evidence tied to that person. So the truth at this point is clear but incomplete. The Siders investigation did not begin at the Siders home. It began months earlier with allegations involving two children and two different men. Information from that case was important enough to open a second investigation. The exact information remains undisclosed, and the two men deny the charges through their not guilty pleas. What happened next would change the scale of everything. The second investigation produced a search warrant connected to Gary Siders Jr. Officers entered the Omer Street home for one stated purpose, but what authorities said they encountered there created an entirely new case. That is where the hidden investigative path became the Siders case the public now recognizes. The public still lacks the full evidence. That evidence gap brings us to March 2026, when BCI opened what the Ohio Attorney General's office called Investigation 2. According to the official release, information gathered during the first investigation prompted this new case involving Gary Siders Jr. and his wife, Elizabeth Siders. The allegations were different from those connected to Saunders and Henderson, but the information trail placed the cases on the same investigative path. Authorities said the second investigation involved allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor who was not part of Gary and Elizabeth's immediate family. The later indictments alleged that the conduct happened between January and September 2022. Gary and Elizabeth were each indicted on 2 counts of sexual battery and 2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. Those charges are allegations, not verdicts. The public has not seen all the evidence behind them, and no court has found either defendant guilty. That matters because the case carries intense emotions, especially when a minor is involved. We can take the accusations seriously and show concern for the alleged victim without claiming we know exactly what happened. Respecting the alleged victim also means protecting that person's identity and avoiding guesses about private details. The biggest unanswered question is what investigators learned during the first case that caused them to open this second one. The Attorney General confirmed that information moved from one investigation to the next, but officials have not publicly described that information. We do not know whether it came from a witness, a record, a test, a device, or something else. Right there, the responsible answer is simple. The connection is confirmed, but the evidence behind it remains private. Investigation 2 continued until June 30th, when authorities executed a search warrant at 182 Omer Street in Hamden, Ohio. Vinton County prosecutor William Archer said officers went to the residence to obtain a DNA sample from Gary Siders Jr. for genetic testing connected to the allegations under investigation. That stated purpose is important because it explains why officers had legal authority to enter the home. The warrant was not publicly described as a planned search for 16 children living in unsafe conditions. Police were following one investigation involving another minor. Once officers entered, authorities said they encountered circumstances that pushed the case in a new direction. In other words, the warrant did not begin as a child endangerment operation, but the officers' reported observations inside the home led to one. Authorities said 16 children were found living in unsafe and unsanitary conditions. The Attorney General's release said the later indictments alleged that the children suffered serious physical harm. We do not need to repeat graphic descriptions to understand why that discovery was serious. The children are not details in a timeline. They are real people whose safety, health, privacy, and recovery should remain at the center of any responsible discussion. If you haven't subscribed to U.S. Crime Cases, join us now as we keep following the evidence, protecting victims, and questioning every unproven claim carefully. The June discovery created what officials called Investigation 3. This was the part of the case the public heard about first, even though it was the last of the 3 investigations to begin. That is why the timeline initially felt confusing. Viewers saw the search, the arrests of 4 adults, and the reports involving 16 children. They did not yet have the earlier path showing how investigators reached that house. That sequence is what made the later arrests of Saunders and Henderson so important to the public. Their cases did not travel backward in time and cause the June search. Instead, their indictments revealed the first branch of the investigation and showed that the nationally known Siders case had grown from earlier work involving other defendants and other allegations. Investigation 3 produced updated child endangerment indictments against the 4 adults who authorities said lived in the home. Gary Siders Jr., Elizabeth Siders, and Christina Siders were each indicted on 19 counts. Gary Siders Sr. was indicted on 16 counts. The charges include felony and misdemeanor child endangerment allegations. The number of charges can sound overwhelming, but the Attorney General explained that some counts were filed in the alternative. In simple terms, prosecutors may use more than one charge or legal theory for the same alleged conduct, allowing the evidence to be presented fully and letting the court decide which theory fits. It does not automatically mean that every count represents a separate incident involving a different child. I understand why a large count total can make people feel that the entire case has already been decided. It has not. An indictment allows a prosecution to move forward. It does not replace a trial. Prosecutors still have to connect the evidence to each charge and each defendant. Defense attorneys can challenge the witnesses, the records, the testing, the search process, and the legal meaning of the alleged conduct. Centering the children does not require us to ignore those legal safeguards. In fact, a careful process matters to alleged victims because a verdict should rest on evidence that can survive serious examination. If the state's case is strong, testing it in court gives the decision credibility. If any charge is unsupported, the court must address that as well. Fairness is not the enemy of accountability. Still, what authorities reported finding raises painful questions about the systems meant to protect children. How could 16 children allegedly remain in unsafe conditions without effective help reaching them sooner? Were warning signs visible outside the home? Did anyone report concerns before June 30? If reports existed, how were they handled? The available public record does not fully answer those questions, so we should not accuse a specific neighbor, worker, school, medical provider, or agency without proof. But asking how the protection system responded is fair. It shifts attention away from spectacle and toward prevention. When a case reaches this scale, the public has a reasonable interest in knowing whether opportunities to help were missed and what changes could prevent another family from reaching the same point. Those answers should come from records, official reviews, and verified statements, not rumors posted online. There is also a serious debate about what the 3 investigations prove when viewed together. One side may believe the handoffs and family connections point toward one broad, coordinated pattern. The other side may argue that investigators simply followed information from one alleged offense to another, and that the cases remain legally separate. At this point, the official record confirms the investigative connection. It does not confirm that all 6 defendants shared one criminal plan. That distinction could become central in court. Prosecutors may present evidence showing why information from one case was relevant to another. Defense lawyers may argue that a family relationship or investigative link creates unfair assumptions about individual guilt. A judge will decide what evidence is legally admissible, and a jury may eventually have to consider whether the state proved the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. The DNA warrant is the turning point because it explains how events reached the Siders' home. Officers entered for evidence connected to Investigation 2, not for a planned child welfare search. Authorities said their observations inside led to a separate child endangerment case. The warrant therefore connected the private March investigation to the public June discovery and widened the group of people facing allegations. But it did not prove that every defendant acted together or settle any charge. The hardest question now is whether the three investigations point to one larger pattern or to separate alleged crimes connected mainly by information and family relationships. The evidence released so far does not answer that. What it does show is that the Siders case was already wider than the first report suggested, and the August arrests finally revealed why. The August announcement brought Saunders and Henderson into the public side of an investigation that had been developing since December. Their names appeared after the June search, but authorities said the case involving them had started first. That timing explains why the announcement changed how people understood the chain of events without changing what had already happened inside the Siders' home. The Ohio Attorney General's office said information from the investigation involving Saunders and Henderson prompted BCI to open the case involving Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders. That connection is confirmed. The exact information behind it is not public. Officials have not identified the statement, record, test result, witness account, or other evidence that caused investigators to move from one case to the next. The reported family relationships naturally draw attention. Public record reporting identifies Saunders as Virginia Siders Saunders' son, Gary Siders Jr.'s nephew, and Gary Siders Sr. and Christina Siders' grandson. Henderson has been reported as Virginia's partner and as connected to the family through marriage. Those relationships may explain why investigators examined links between the people, but they do not establish guilt. Did anyone know about another person's alleged conduct? Did information move between households? Did anyone knowingly help another person conceal evidence or avoid attention? Are any alleged victims connected across the three investigations? Authorities have not publicly established those points. A family relationship can help investigators identify possible witnesses, locations, or records. It cannot prove that relatives shared knowledge or acted together. This is where both sides of the legal issue matter. Prosecutors may believe the evidence shows why one investigation led into another. Defense lawyers may argue that family ties and connected investigations could create unfair assumptions about individual defendants. The court will have to separate those connections from the evidence supporting each specific charge. Every person must be judged by what prosecutors can prove about that person. The delay between the beginning of Investigation 1 and the August arrests also remains partly unexplained. Investigators may have needed time to interview witnesses, examine records, complete testing, and prepare evidence for the grand jury. That is common in complicated cases, especially when minors and sensitive evidence are involved. However, officials have not released a complete month-by-month account of the investigation. Court records show that Saunders and Henderson entered not guilty pleas. Their pleas do not prove the accusations are false, just as the indictments do not prove the accusations are true. Prosecutors must present admissible evidence. Defense attorneys can challenge witnesses, records, testing, timelines, and the way the investigation was conducted. A judge will decide what evidence the jury is allowed to consider. I understand why careful legal language can feel uncomfortable when the accusations involve children. Still, a fair process matters to alleged victims as well as defendants. A case built on reliable evidence is more likely to survive challenges and produce a trusted result. Rushing to judgment may feel satisfying for a moment, but it can create confusion and spread claims that the court has never tested. The children should remain at the center of the human side of this case. They deserve privacy, protection, proper care, and the chance to recover away from online speculation. Their names, photographs, personal histories, and possible connections to the different investigations should not be guessed or shared. We can recognize the seriousness of the allegations without turning private suffering into public entertainment. Prosecutor William Archer also credited Dollar General employees with contacting authorities because of concerns about children they observed. He did not publicly explain everything the employees saw, which children were involved, or how their information traveled through each investigation. Their decision to report a concern mattered, but we should not give them knowledge they never claimed to have. If you believe a child is in immediate danger, the responsible step is to report what you actually observe to emergency services or the proper child protection agency. A report allows trained professionals to examine the situation. It does not prove that a crime happened, and it should not become an excuse to spread rumors, names, or accusations online. The reported discovery of 16 children also raises questions about the systems meant to protect them. Were warning signs visible before June 30? Did anyone previously contact an agency? If concerns were recorded, how were they handled? The available public record does not fully answer those questions. We should not blame a particular neighbor, school, medical provider, social worker, or agency without verified evidence. Answers about missed warning signs should come from agency records, official reviews, sworn testimony, or court documents. If failures are confirmed, officials should explain what went wrong and what will change afterward. Ohio Attorney General Andy Wilson said the August indictments were the latest developments and that the work was far from complete. His statement confirmed that the investigations were continuing when the indictments were announced. It did not guarantee more arrests or charges. Investigators may uncover additional evidence, while the court process may also narrow, dismiss, or change some allegations. There are two fair ways to view the connected investigations. One possibility is that the information handoffs and family links point toward a broader pattern that authorities are still examining. Another is that investigators followed information through separate alleged offenses involving different people. The public record confirms that the investigations are connected. It does not confirm that all 6 defendants participated in one coordinated plan. Several important questions, therefore, remain open. The public does not know the exact evidence that connected the first investigation to Gary and Elizabeth. Officials have not said whether alleged victims overlap across the cases. We do not know which evidence the defense teams will challenge, what the judge will admit, or how prosecutors will explain the relationships among the defendants. What is confirmed is that the investigation involving Saunders and Henderson began before the June search. Information from that case opened a second investigation. A DNA warrant connected to the second case brought officers into the Saunders residence, where authorities said their observations led to a child endangerment investigation. The August indictments placed these events together on one public timeline. The next stage belongs to the courts and the continuing investigation. Prosecutors must prove each charge against each defendant. Defense lawyers have the right to test the state's evidence. The alleged victims deserve dignity and protection throughout that process. Every indictment remains an allegation, and every defendant is presumed innocent unless proved guilty in court. Thank you for staying with U.S. Crime Cases until the end. Subscribe, share your thoughts respectfully, and return as verified court developments become publicly available.